I think he should be good at that.
Is he out there, sir?
But anyway,
I'll wave to him on the highway.
all right. So he wants to speak to us a few minutes, and so we're going to go ahead and give him the floor right now.
Thank you very much, Gene. Thank you all very much for letting me come in. I didn't prepare any formal comments, but I'm going to start by talking about something that I'm going to start with next Saturday, and that is there are a couple things I have to atone for. One of which is, yes, indeed, I used to be a Republican, but I also used to drink too much, too. So there might be a correlation there. I was approached not too long ago about running for the chairmanship, not so much because anybody feels that anything has been done incorrectly, but the idea is to try to get some new energy and some new people and some fresh eyes and fresh hands and fresh feet on the ground to try to push us further down the road. And we got 2012 coming up, and we need to have an infrastructure in place that shows the National Democratic Party that we have a sophisticated, well-organized group of people that they're going to be willing to support come 2012. You know, Virginia Fox has been an embarrassment and a thorn in our side for a long time, and it is my hope, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but it's my hope that we can convince Billy Kennedy to run again and make sure that we can supply the resources he needs to mount a significant challenge to her. The fact that she has $1.5 million makes it very, very hard for him to compete with only $300,000 raised in the last race. Now, that's rather extraordinary if you think about the fact that he has the name recognition that he now has on such a limited budget. Now, what do we need to do, and what is my vision for all of this? Well, it starts with some basic things that we need to do. All of the counties have been working very hard with inside their own silos. We need to make sure that all those silos are now connected. And how do we do that? Well, initially it's with making more efficient the upstream and downstream flow of information between the district and the counties. That starts with the website and making sure that the district's website is easily navigable and accessible by the counties. Making sure the counties, if you don't already have a website, making sure that you have a site that's attached to the district site, so that when we have information to send down, it goes down to all the counties, and when the counties have something they want to share with the district and the other counties, it comes back up and then redistributed yet again. And to that end, and you're going to hear other people talk about this as well, we need to make sure that we have a response for everything. For example, Virginia Fox got caught for reckless driving last week. We didn't hear about it. It would be very nice if the district could craft a letter to the editor that would then come out to each one of the counties. It simply says, local county chairperson so-and-so, and then have a thing saying, this type of behavior is unacceptable for a person that is trying to uphold the laws of this nation, yet chooses to break them at her own will when she feels like she needs to get someplace quickly. And obviously this type of behavior on her part is a very common thing. Now, further, what we need to do is make sure that we have a lot of energy. We need to make sure that we all have a very common message that we can put forth that is easily digestible and defensible by everybody in the party. For far too long, we've allowed the Republicans to define who we are. They have told us that we are godless and we are spineless and we spend too much money. And we, conversely, have allowed that and have been on the defense. We need to take control of that message and stand up and say, we are Democrats because we believe in freedom for all. We believe in all civil rights, including gay marriage. We believe in the fact that our seniors need to be protected, Social Security needs to be solidified, and there are ways that we can help do that. We're talking about some solutions to the Social Security issue in particular. We need to talk about the fact that Medicare needs to be protected. All these folks that have been sold a bill of goods by the Republicans are saying, we need to cut spending, but hands off my Medicare. They don't, there's this disconnect. There's an absolute disconnect. And these folks have also been sold a bill of goods from the Republicans in that somehow or another they have been convinced that the rich and corporations are on our side. They are not. We were talking earlier about the tax code. Article off of Bloomberg 3 weeks ago. If you made over $500,000 last year, you paid an average tax rate of 17%. I do okay, not great. All in, after all deductions, I was somewhere around 36% last year. How does that work? And how is that fair? How is that a level playing field when you're individual? My wife's a shop owner. She's getting killed too. From the self-employment tax on down the line. It is all stacked against all of us that are supposedly the greatest economic engine that the Republicans want to support. Now, to that point about the economic engines, all we've been hearing about from Raleigh and from D.C. is cuts in education spending. Our children are the greatest potential economic engines we have. And if they're not even qualified to manufacture the widgets that we don't manufacture here anymore, we are going to end up supporting them just as much as we're supporting everybody else. And eventually it'll collapse upon itself. Education is not a space where we should be considering budget cuts. It just doesn't make sense. It collapses on itself. Anyhow, I don't want to continue to bore. I get a little wonkish, and I apologize for that. Now, I'm going to throw one more statistic at you, and then I'll try to come up with something funny to leave you with. Monday's Wall Street Journal, C-section, money and investing. I'm a stockbroker by trade, so I see this stuff all day long. I'm going to ask you a question. Did any of you get an 11% raise last year? Did anybody you know get an 11% raise last year? No. You know who got an average 11% raise last year? The top 50 highest paid CEOs in the country. Yeah, they were really struggling at 59 million. They really needed to go to 67.
They got a bonus for driving us over the cliff. You know.
That's right. That's exactly right. There has never been a time in our nation's history when things have been so skewed to the wealthy. Now, I'm coming from a very interesting position. My family used to be one of those people. But they also had a sense of justice. They had a sense of giving back to their community. My greatest inheritance is that sense of community and the fact that we all deserve this opportunity. I am not opposed to anybody making money or getting rich. I mean, that's part of the American dream. But I am opposed to the hoarding of wealth, the protection of it, and that being created on the backs of those that are being excluded from the opportunity to have their own. So at any rate, I'm not going to beat up on anything that's come before me in the 5th District. I'm relatively new to Democratic politics. I'm just back to Minnesota. From Minnesota as of 2005. What I can offer is some new energy and a chance for those that used to be like me or are still like I was and are looking for a way out. Because not only do we need to reinvigorate our base, which is something we always talk about, but we have to go after the independents and all of the Republicans that are disgusted with what they've been through. That party has talked about jobs, 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 and all they have engaged in is in social engineering. And it's offensive and it's wrong. I was sick of it. I saw it with Bush, at any rate, blurring the lines between church and state and every other thing that government has absolutely no business being in. They talked about limited government involvement in personal lives, and that's all they've been interested in. So I'll leave you with this. If I have your vote this Saturday, I will do my best to help shape the district in the way that I have just mentioned, and streamlining our information and putting forth our best effort for 2012. Because we want to have the attention of the National Democrats if we're going to get their support to support a guy like Billy Kennedy, if we can get him to run again, so we can beat Virginia Fox and get that embarrassment off of the books. So, any questions for me?
Before you take questions, give us a little bit of your background, if you would.
I'm a
family
complete wreck.
Yeah, I understand. If you don't mind, just give us some background about your family and your present.
Sure. Well, I'm from Winston-Salem. My family's been from Winston-Salem since Winston was first started. In fact, my oldest ancestor is a guy named Robert Gray, who came from Surrey County. And when Winston was first sold or divvied up by the Moravians, Robert Gray bought the very first parcel of land on which he opened basically was a dry goods store. And anyhow, he had a whole series of sons who did various things. They got involved in sort of trade and whatnot. But the more significant is there was a guy named Bowman Gray Sr., who back in the late 1800s left a job working for his father-in-law, a little one-room bank called Wachovia, to take a pay cut to go sell tobacco for an unknown guy named Richard Joshua Reynolds. And was up in Baltimore, and he basically wired back and said, people are loving this stuff. They love Prince Albert, but I think if we can find a way to mechanize this process and really get into the prepackaged cigarette business, I think we can do well. And from that point on, he was involved with Reynolds up until the time he died. My grandfather, at age 11, started as a leaf stemmer and then worked his way up to president and chairman as well. My father left Reynolds in 1969 after My grandfather died and got into, he was up in Wall Street and doing some of the stuff that we find so abhorrent. He died at age 46 when I was 15. At any rate, that's another long and boring story, but my history is that once I was born in Winston-Salem, 6 months old, we moved to Paris with my father's new job, and we were there until 1974. Moved back to Pennsylvania. I was there for 4 years, came back to Winston-Salem, lived out on my grandfather's farm up until 1983, which at that point I was getting ready to go in the 8th grade, and like every other good kid of my ilk, I was sent away to school. Went to boarding school for a couple of years up in Connecticut, then to the Macaulay School for Boys in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And about halfway through my 10th grade year, Macaulay saw it fit to politely ask me to leave. Well, all this stuff comes out. I want you to hear it from me. And I came home and barely graduated from Mission Begins High School, which was in Winston-Salem and is now over in Kernersville. From there, I went to the College of Charleston for a time and had entirely too much fun. It's a beautiful school from the outside. I couldn't tell you what the inside looks like. Went to work for a while and finally decided to get my act together. One of the things I needed to do was to remove myself from any influence of family or what have you, and I moved out to the Midwest. And I was in Minnesota, went to the University of St. Thomas out there in St. Paul, Minnesota, met my wife, got a job at what was Dane Bosworth, which now many of you know is RBC Dane Rauscher, and then did my turns through various brokerage firms, and then was eventually hired by a small boutique outfit called Miller Johnson, Steichen and Kennard that not only offered retail brokerage services, but we engaged in investment banking for startup companies. Essentially what we did was we would find medical device companies that were looking for anywhere from $3 to $5 million, and I could go to my individual investors and say, hey, this is a great idea, and I could go and raise $10,000, $15,000 from individual people, which made a lot of sense because this way an average investor had a chance at investing in a way that the rich normally do, because normally to get into venture you have to put up hundreds of thousands of dollars into a fund of some sort and then let somebody else make the decisions for you and hope you get some money back later. This allowed an average person to, in the same account where they were buying General Electric or some municipal bond, a chance to buy into a local company. I liked this idea because this meant that I was taking people's money and I was helping to create something as opposed to just getting in the middle. We had tremendous success doing that up in Minneapolis. I convinced them when my daughter decided to go to Wake Forest University that on my return to Winston-Salem that we needed to open an office down here based on what was going on in the research part. Winston-Salem was very interesting. I mean, they're obviously transitioning off of banking, tobacco, and textiles like most of the area and working on the meds, eds, and arts. So there was lots of fertile ground down here to try to raise money and to create some local wealth while building businesses. Well, opened an office, and then a year later, the powers that be with my old firm decided to sell out. So anyway, I went off on my own after they sold out because they've sold out to a much larger firm. And working for big brokerage firms has never been my thing, being that their desire is to make sure that the individual is actually a customer of the firm as opposed to a customer of the individual, and also make sure that they're loaded up with as much proprietary product as humanly possible. That if you've ever been involved in that and you try and leave the firm, you find out you can't move the stuff, and if you try to sell it, they kill you on the way out the door, which I think is unconscionable. And that's, ironically enough, one of the things Elliot Spitzer was going after before he got himself into so much trouble. And it's really unfortunate because I think he would have done a lot to clean up Wall Street even further. I do have two children. I have a daughter, Alex, who's 23, who now is back in Minneapolis working full-time, thank God. My son is 12 years old and is in 6th grade at Summit School, which is where I went, my father went, and all my uncles and everybody else. The running joke is that I did leave Winston-Salem. The truth was not to get away from anything, but I needed to go out there to find a wife. Because if I married anybody from Winston-Salem, there was a 30% chance that I was probably going to be related to them and our children were going to come out. So, married a half German, half Swedish woman, and she's brilliant and beautiful, and more importantly, she tolerates me and my desire to be involved in all this kind of thing, because obviously I spend some time away from home doing this. But
Yeah, tell us about your involvement with the campaigns in the 5th District.
Yes, the important part.
Yeah.
I first got involved in politics doing various things a long time ago when I was a Republican, but never all that seriously. For those of you who pulled my donor record, the contributions to George H.W. Bush in 1979 were not me. They were my father. I was 10 years old. I promise I didn't give him that money. but I got credit for it. 19, I guess it was 2004 where I became really disgusted with what I was seeing. Obviously, there were no weapons of mass destruction. There was this effort to get the federal government involved in faith-based projects and all these things where they shouldn't have been. Moved back here in 2005, and obviously people were talking about the next presidential election. 2007 rolled around, and I looked at the presidential field. I didn't see anybody on the Republican side that I thought was even remotely qualified or interesting. John McCain seemed to me to be a guy that was better suited to cutting keys at the Ace Hardware than he would be running the president.
Hear, hear.
And I saw Barack Obama, and I thought, boy, I had seen his speech, obviously, from the previous convention. I thought, we're going to be hearing more from that guy. And I heard he was running for president. And honestly, my thought at the time was, I think that's great, but he's just too young. He's not experienced enough. He's just not ready for the big chair. A couple months later, I get a call from my sister in Chapel. She teaches in Chapel Hill, and she knows a couple of folks who were involved in the early days of the Obama campaign. And she simply said, "You got to meet this guy." Long story short, I got a chance to meet David Plouffe when he came to town and his team. And then when Obama came during the primary, I got a chance to talk with him for a little bit during that time. That was the same morning that he had to go on national television. Undoubtedly, he had been up all night the night before, but he had to deal with Reverend Wright. He and Axelrod Plouffe were just going, "Oh, God, this guy won't go away." Anyway, up all night, had to do that. Then he had to come backstage and be nice to all of us schmucks who had wiggled our way into getting a chance to meet him. And he was the most thoughtful and considerate politician I have ever met in my life. He didn't try to overtalk. He listened and he considered. And my last comment to him was, Mr. President, I was being presumptuous. You are the last best hope for our country at this point, because we are in the absolute trash can, internationally speaking, and our economy was in a tailspin. This was at the point in my business in the spring of '08 when the markets were completely coming unglued, and fear was just rampant. And here was this guy saying, there was that great email with him standing behind the podium saying, "Don't worry, I got this." And I really held on to that. I really, really held on to that. Anyhow, I did all kinds of, obviously I supported him financially if I could. I ran food to the district office and, made some phone, just whatever we could do to be of help. All of us, I think, felt like we had some ownership in that. And this really made me feel like, what? If I can get involved, I can be a part of this. This truly is my country. And more than that, this is a president who believes in a country that I want to live in. He represents that. The follow-on to that is I got involved with Ken Lewis. He came to my office before he actually decided that he was going to run. Talked with him for a long time, tried to help him as best as I could. When he lost in the primary, I then worked very closely with Cal Cunningham. We had a great time in the short time. Talk about a high-energy campaign. That was a lot of fun. Very brief, but a lot of fun. And then on with Billy Kennedy. Did a lot of fundraising work with him and some phone calling and so forth. So, I believe in the democratic message. This is an America for all people. And, there are some situations in my life where I've talked about having to reach out for help. Now, I'm one of the very lucky people that when I reached out for help, it was there. And someone was there to take care of it. 90% of America doesn't have that luxury. It is now my job to make sure that when someone reaches out for that help or wants the types of educational opportunities that I had just because, those need to be there for them. It can't just be for the few. It can't just be. And the way things are going, not only is money skewing continually to the rich, but education is also being skewed to the rich as well. And we are going to have not only financially, but intellectually polarized country. And that's just wrong if we're trying to move ourselves forward. So, did that answer? Did
Yep.
I go overboard?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Just didn't want you to forget that part.
All right. So I've got one funny thing to say, just so you won't forget.
No, I'm not finished with you yet.
You're not? All right, well,
Speak to the issue of Social Security and what you feel like is a healthy way to address the Social Security issue.
all right, well, unfortunately, I'm one of those people who thinks it could be simple. Social Security is probably one of the most regressive taxes we have, aside from cigarettes. Average smoker's income is $27,000 a year, and they're paying $3 a pack of cigarettes. Yes, they should quit. no doubt about it, I'm not going to advocate it. However, I think that is extraordinarily unfair that most of the states and the federal government are balancing the budgets off of the backs of the poorest people in this nation off of advice that will kill them. Yes, I did say that, despite my family history. Social Security, 5% on the first 102,000, I believe it is. So that encompasses basically 96% of America. Is that right?
Yep.
Why not? This is just a novel idea. Cut that rate to 2.5%, remove the cap.
Move the cap, right?
Remove the
Holy
cap.
cow! Social Security's funded. The rich don't even feel it. And boy, I tell you what, at $100,000 a year, $2,500 makes a big difference to me. Hell, that's my cable bill for the year. Right? Well, that's a house payment. You know, that's real money to real people. And quite frankly, you know, the wealthy, I mean, what they pay in, they're going to get it back. They're going to get it back. You know, but there's continuously these budget cuts based on cutting into education. That's so short-sighted. We are shooting ourselves in the foot, and we are allowing it to happen. Now, as far as who we are as Democrats, ladies and gentlemen, we have to stop allowing the Republicans to define who we are. We are not weak. We are not faithless. Yes, we believe in we are our brother's keepers. The world is entirely too small a place now to argue otherwise. Sometimes in politics we have to wrestle with skunks. But only a fool is going to allow the skunk to choose the weapon. We need to take that fight back, ladies and gentlemen. And it starts here. It doesn't start at the top. That's the beauty of democracy, and we've forgotten that. It doesn't start with the president. The president's a reflection of us. Take that pyramid and turn it upside down. It starts here. And with any luck, and I hope that you will allow me to try to lead this district into this next generation, because I tell you what, our time is here and now. If we don't fight back right here, right now, if we don't draw that line in the sand, we're just going to be having the same argument, the same words over and over. You know, I hate to sound rhetorical, but we've all heard the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. That fly against the glass, you know, the kid doesn't know why he can't get out. I hope that I can be a part of that change. So, anyway, I'll be quiet now. You got me going, and all of a sudden.
Are you going to be able to get Billy Kennedy to come to the 5th District and speak for you?
I hope so. I don't want to speak for him. I talked to him the other day.
Speak for you.
Speak for me?
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be difficult. You know, I have never met David Crawford. But everybody that I have talked to all say the same thing. You're running against David Crawford? Oh, we love David. And, you know, he is, you know, from all accounts, he's a great guy. We're talking about, you know, a lifelong Democrat. This guy's been a Democrat since I was 4 years old. He knows this party. He knows the relationships between here in D.C. and Raleigh. And these are all things that, quite frankly, I'm going to need help with. So I'm hopeful if I win this that he's not going to go away, because God knows I'm going to need him for all kinds of reasons. But, you know, I sent out an email that was to one person, but it ended up going out to thousands apparently. But the closing line is that this is based on we and not me. You know, I am not. Yeah, I got a big ego and I'm a little arrogant. You know, humility. The thing about humility is you know, once you think you got it, you lost it. You know?
Wasn't it a bunch of the Billy Kennedy folks that asked you to run?
Yes.
Laney and
Yes, it was.
SEN.
It was. I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus in case it didn't work out. What, you know, this is. I mean, if I win or lose, if I win, it's all because of you. If I lose, it's all my fault. Okay, stand together, follow on. I promise. I won't take anybody with me. But to that end, too, if I don't win, this is not to say that you're not going to see me again. I feel so passionate about what we are trying to accomplish. You know, we have this crack. If you and I are sitting here having this conversation, me as a former Republican, you all sitting here listening, this is not the first of these conversations that's taking place. This has to be happening in other places around the state and around the country. I'm not the first one. I'm not the only one. but we got to grab hold of this opportunity, because not only do we, like I said, need to reinvigorate the base, we've got to grab those independents, and we've got to get those Republicans that are absolutely disgusted and hiding. I've got a father of an old friend who's voted Democrat for the last 10 years, but he hasn't changed his registration. One of my goals this year is I want him. I want him to stand up and be counted. And I think we can do that. And, you know, one of the dangers is not trusting what we see with some folks on, you know, that we're trying to bring over. We have to believe that their heart is in the right place. And it's okay, and it's not an easy thing. I mean, you all have been party members all your lives. Imagine reaching a point where you look back and think, my God, how could I have been so wrong? You know, some people don't, I mean, it was not an overnight, I mean, it was something I knew, but it took me a long time to get to that public. We got to be able to open the door and say, you know what, it's okay, time to come home.
You are exactly what Jim Neal said you were.
Really? He's full of it.
That too.
Don't trust a politician when he tells you this.